Good morning. So, financial education is obviously something that I speak about loads on the podcast. And I always talk about the fact that we don't get taught so much stuff in schools. And every time I do an event or speak at a workshop, I ask people, were you taught this stuff in school? And very rarely do I see hands go up. I think everyone will agree it is a topic that we need to change. We need to change it. I'm doing some work in Parliament at the moment. We're going to have a petition out in a couple of weeks. More on that later on. But in this episode this week, I wanted to speak to someone who's actually doing the work on the ground. And her social media account is freaking awesome. It is so good. The information is so clear, so concise. And really, I look up to the account because of the clarity of the information. Actually, the production quality is top notch as well. So I'm really excited that she's agreed to come on the show today. I'm going to be speaking with Abby Foster. She's the founder of Elent, and her passion is all about financial education. And she's never had any financial education like myself in her own life as well. So I want to talk a little bit about her work, how she's actually started doing this, and really talk a little bit about financial education as a whole. So Abby, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's really good to have you. I can't even begin to tell you.
Thank you so much for having me. Right back at you. I've listened to you for a long time and I just am very excited to be chatting to you.
No worries. It's yeah, like I said, your content on social media, I see it sometimes. I'm like, okay, it's really clear, it's really concise. The studio that you use, I have to ask you, is that a studio? Is that green screen? What is it? It's a really nice setup.
It is a studio. So it is a studio up in North London called Dream Factory, and you can record content there. We use it because for me, I used to get so overwhelmed with recording a video in my kitchen, then, re-recording it later. And whereas with this, I can just go away, record batch content, and then release it later, which for me works. But yeah, it is something I do enjoy that as well.
Cool. So tell me a little bit about kind of like your beginnings, because like I've already mentioned there, you didn't have any financial education yourself. You are an accountant, a chartered accountant. How do you go from that into financial education, working with schools, universities, and the work that you do at the moment with at Elent?
Yeah, so I've got incredible parents, but you're right. I never had that financial education because they didn't have it. My mum is a hairdresser. My dad's a builder. They are they're very intelligent in their own way. But when it comes to finances, I was always very aware that, they would go to their accountant or they would seek advice from other people. So for me, it was something I knew I was going to have to learn myself. I studied accountancy at university and then worked in the glossy magazine industry. So I worked for Condé Nast and Hearst as an accountant. And then when I was at Hearst, I loved my job and I qualified as an ACA chartered accountant. But I realized that my real passion lied in the inequality gaps that we face in society, such as the gender pay gap. And I just had a brainwave one day and I realized, right, how was I going to fix this? Kind of mind mapped it out really naively. And one of the kind of spread offs was, you should be teaching this in schools. And I looked around and there just wasn't enough. There are some people doing it and everyone's giving it a really good go, but there wasn't enough. And there obviously wasn't enough quality education because, like you said at the beginning, every time I was asking rooms full of people, be it young people or older people, have you learned about this? Or have you heard about this from school? Or have you learned about just financial education in general? Everyone was saying no. And so, yeah, I just decided to come in and fix that.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because one thing that I found, it's kind of this weird thing. The curriculum that is currently in schools was created so many years ago, and I think society at that point would think, okay, it's the parents' responsibility to teach kids. But one thing I found is, number one, and this is true today in the education system when they talk about numeracy being part of the curriculum and whether it is fit for purpose. You can't teach what you don't know. And the reality is, you also don't know what you don't know until you know you don't know it. And I firmly believe that in order for you to be able to deliver financial education in a way that is, number one, engaging for the kids, is easy for them to understand and is broken down into such a way that is easy to also consume, you need to have a bit of a passion, enthusiasm, and some kind of I guess, drive to actually want to do it properly. And it's not just part of the day that you have to deliver. And it's a topic that, oh my God, I don't know this topic. So how am I going to teach it to kids kind of thing? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's for me, as we've spoken about, it's like my passion. I'm so angry about the unjustness of lack of financial education and what it can end up doing to people that it drives me every single time I go into a school, whether I'm teaching year one, which is like age 6, or year 13, where you're getting to 18 and leaving school. They all deserve quality education, and they all deserve it now, not in the future. So many of my friends growing up would say, oh, wish we'd had this at school. And then I got to an age where I was, in my career for a while, and I said, well, what is going on? Why do we still not have this? Why is no one taking ownership of this and saying, right, I'll go and do it? Because it's really sad. Like, that's just a very sad realization that we can just constantly say, oh, I wish I'd had that, and never change anything.
Yeah. I think as well, because we're in 2023, it's more important now than ever to equip kids, because my biggest fear, and I say this all the time, is that, the curriculum, when it was created, it was a very different world. You could, get into a job with a final salary pension and be taken care of for life. And now it's very, very different. You go into work, and unfortunately, you've got defined contribution pensions. So the onus is entirely on you. And we're in a different age now. Cryptocurrency, the threat of AI taking jobs, the challenges are very, very different to what they were in the 60s and 70s. And so I guess I would love to hear your thoughts on how important you think financial education is in 2023 and beyond, given that the world is changing so much and has changed.
Yeah, it's about, it can change lives. And I don't mean that dramatically. I mean that in the sense that, we can protect wealth, and that's never explained about. We talk about, investing, compound interest, and growing wealth, but what about protecting it? Because for a lot of young people, they don't realize, like you said, that these defined contribution pensions put the onus back on you, and they don't realize that they need to be protecting themselves, not just from their income right now, but from their income in the future, not making, bad decisions. And I think, yeah, it starts with obviously teaching it at school. But in 2023, it's because we have got a generation now where going to uni is just a given for some reason, which it shouldn't be. It's assumed that we all go now, and that's kind of the like base level, which is crazy. And then what it does is everyone has to step up a gear and up a gear. And then, the next base level is masters. And everyone keeps forgetting that all of these things cost money. Whilst a student loan is different to other loans, we've talked about this, I'm sure, it's still a debt, and we need to be protecting our wealth, not constantly finding new ways to spend it. That's how I feel, like, especially in 23, it's like the main reason financial education should be taught is protecting your wealth and being able to change your life for the better.
I don't want to call them conspiracy theories, but if you speak to ordinary people, oftentimes, and I'll be interested to hear your view on this, I hear they don't want to teach you because they want to keep you working class, which is a conversation onto its own. But what I would like to know from your point of view is, what do you think truly needs to change in order for financial education to be tangible in this country, based on the work that you're doing in schools and the things that you've observed?
Ooh, that's a tough question. What do I think truly needs to change? I think the education system needs complete reform, but that's probably, again, like you said, it's a very big topic to take on my own, but I really do believe in it. I think, like you said before, the school system was written hundreds of years ago, and for some reason we still act in the same way we did. We still have the kind of 9 to 5 mentality of the school day. We still have the, you need to sit in classrooms all facing the teacher. You need to sit certain subjects that benefit certain people. And yet in many other stages of life, in our jobs, in the content creation sphere, we have kind of branched outside of that and realized that, it takes all sorts, like neurodiverse people to kind of do things differently, educate differently. For instance, myself included, I realized I was never going to be someone that was going to start a blog. I happen to be dyslexic, and therefore writing for me is just not a thing, but audio, visual, love it. And that's how I can teach people. So that's how I'm going to do it. And with schools, we need to be going back to schools and realizing that the world has changed so much. Why do we still teach in the exact same way? Not just finance, everything.
Yeah.
But then if I am going to obviously harp on about finance, that's the thing. We cannot develop just a textbook. I think often people think, when I say to them, I'm writing a financial education curriculum, they think that I'm writing like a list of subjects that everyone must know, and that at the end of it, they're going to all have to sit an exam. And if they don't get over 80%, then they're financial failures. No, that is the complete opposite of what we need to achieve. What we need to achieve is this safe space where everybody with neurodiversities, everybody from all over the country feels heard and is also able to, take part in this education without feeling pushed, and out without feeling like, right, if you don't invest, you're a failure. If you don't open a bank account with this company, you're a failure. None of that. It's just the basics of what you should know, and what I think will help you, and hopefully what others will come in and help me develop will think that everyone should know as well. I'm not saying it's going to suit absolutely everyone. You can't always achieve that. But by teaching the differences, what the nuances are on a payslip, and then also explaining how to be self-employed maybe, and how that financially works, could be really beneficial to not just a handful of people, but every single person in the UK.
Yeah, I would agree with so much of what you've said there. I mean, particularly on the neurodiversity thing. I recently found out that I'm mildly dyslexic, and I found out after writing my book. Actually, the thing that triggered me to finally take a test was I had to record the audiobook for the book, and it took longer than I ever expected. It was so stressful. And in my head, when I read, I don't read the full sentence. I look at words and then form the sentence. That's the way my brain basically works. And it became a problem because with the book, those are my words. I know what I wrote. So when I'm reading it, I'm connecting the words. But the woman's saying, you're not reading the actual words. And I'm like, yes, I am. So I took a test, and I found out I'm mildly dyslexic. But I think you're right. If we're going to teach kids financial education, it isn't just about the textbook stuff. I mean, I'm really passionate about how you bring in video, visuals, and a wide range of content, because I can't sit there and read a textbook anymore. When I was in school, I could cram stuff and I was relatively good at it. But as I've got older, I can't do it anymore. So I think you're right. Different approaches are absolutely needed so that it's as effective as possible, and you're hitting as many of the nuances when it comes to personality types, learning types in schools in real time, day to day. I'm interested to know, given the fact that you go into to schools and universities, are there any common kind of like threads that you've noticed delivering financial education in school? Do you find that there are certain things that work really, really well? Do you find that, teachers are kind of open to the idea of someone externally coming into the school? Because I think sometimes people think, well, actually, how do you get into a school? How does that even work?
Yeah, I've had wonderful experiences with teachers. I made this joke, but it's actually not a joke. If I was the Prime Minister, I would knight all teachers just from the off, because I have a tiny experience of going into schools and teaching in schools. It is so difficult. It's so hard, and they do not get the recognition they all deserve. So I've actually had wonderful experiences with teachers about bringing me in, because often when I'm delivering workshops, especially to the older years, I do get a few teachers sat at the back of the classroom that then come to me at the end and they say, oh, can I just show you my payslip? I'm not sure I understand this. And we get in this conversation back and forth about their own finances, which I love. I'm here for everyone. I'm not here just to teach the kids. It's just what I'm doing right now. But in terms of like common threads, I would say you have these like peaks and troughs with interest, I've noticed, because I do teach from year 1 to year 13, so the entire spectrum. You get really excited young people in junior school years that want to tell you everything they possibly know about money, and they want to use the word investing, not quite understanding what it means, but that's fine. Using the word is just as good. Yeah. They want to tell you that their mum's friend's auntie was an accountant as well. They really kind of immerse themselves in it. And I think what's beautiful about teaching in the junior schools is actually, okay, we might not be explaining the nuances of investing or nuances of pensions, those sorts of topics, but we're letting them have a space to be talking about money, which I never remember having. I never remember in junior school talking about finance or money at all. And what we're doing is we're just giving them space to say, absolutely fine. Tell us what you think. How do you feel? How do you kind of think about money? And not even changing their opinion, just saying, what is your opinion? Have one. Don't kind of put a taboo on the words, because then as they grow up, they feel like they can't talk about it. Whereas as we then go into the common threads of senior schools and sixth forms, you know, it is the age old stuff, because TikTok is their search engine, and everywhere you look, for some reason, there is someone talking about crypto. And rightly or wrongly, I spend a lot of my time explaining that cryptocurrency is a currency, and 95% of the room will be shocked by that discovery, which is unnerving. And yeah, it's often around cryptocurrency or investing in general, because they all have these kind of mindsets. They want to get rich quick. They want to get rich now. And the only thing they've seen that that's happened to in their generational minds has been cryptocurrency. But they all forget, you know, the higher you rise, the higher you can fall, or the quicker, the drops can be equally as dramatic. And I think also my final thread would be entrepreneurship. You know, we have a next generation, the Gen Zs and the Gen As, that are very excited to be running things differently and be entrepreneurs, be working for themselves. And I think if we don't, another kind of going back to your original question, like, why should we be doing this? It's because if we don't do this, we're going to breed a new age of entrepreneurs that have zero understanding around finance and money, that can really damage them. You know, they can miss tax liabilities, they can misunderstand what they're meant to be paying. A lot of people think that if they make money on social media that they don't have to pay tax. I don't know where that misconception came from, but it's a sad realization when I have to explain that to them and watch their faces drop, that especially if they're making good money, you know, that tax bill can be 50% of their income gone. So yeah, I think there are many, many common threads across the range, but yeah, especially at those last years, it's all around investing.
It's interesting you mentioned TikTok and social media there, because I would love to know your views on how important you feel social media is, because I spoke at an event last week, and it was to industry professionals in my field, financial advice and mortgage advice, and I was quoting some stats, and the room couldn't quite believe it. And I'm like, 1 in 3 people now use social media for their financial content, either for advice, guidance, whatever. They're going to social media. So if you're not there, unfortunately, you're missing a trick. And I find that TikTok, Instagram, obviously I'm on YouTube, for example. I'm on Instagram, for example. It's such an important avenue to make sure you're occupying, because there are some bad voices out there. How important do you think that social media avenue is going to be for young people now? Because I can't see it slowing down anytime soon.
No, if anything, it's speeding up. And I think it's more important than ever that the right voices are heard, because I had the exact same conversation. So when I started Ellen, and I was thinking, right, where do I want to be? I realized I needed to be where those school kids were. So I can come into their classroom and deliver a workshop for an hour, 2 hours, a full day, a week, whatever. But when I go, where are they going to be able to go to ask their questions? And I realized that I had to be present on social media, because that's where they were. And in that process, I realized that there is a whole other generation. We've got millennials, boomers, the rest of everybody else that also wish they had this at their school, and they need to ask their questions. And so it's about providing a really kind of safe space to just, you know, talk about the topics like you said right at the beginning that they don't even know that they need to know. I often get comments in some of my reels where people say, I didn't even know this was a tax, or I didn't even know that was a thing. And then they can learn something from it. You know, I really try and keep my Instagram especially very, very educational. I don't talk about anything else on there. I just keep it very like, you know, this is some finance knowledge you should know. Here it is. Done. I say to people, right, on Fridays, we do Finance Fridays with Foster. Ask me anything. And if I don't have time to put it into a story for you, I will make a reel. Like, you're providing me with content, which is great, ideas, and then I'll go and facilitate that for you and answer those questions. And on Sundays, I do a Sunday quiz where I ask questions. And it's not because I have this undying need to be on Instagram developing stories all my time. It's that I know that if I can create just 6 questions on a Sunday evening that kind of ignite that mind to like think about finance just for a little bit, you know, get their competitive spirit going, it's a brilliant thing. And like, I get lovely messages from the quizzes where people say like, I'm learning so much because I'm forcing myself to do this every Sunday as my like one thing in finance, and that's fine. You don't need to be and also, the world would be such a boring place if we were all accountants. We don't all need to be accountants, but what we do need is just a little bit of understanding. And the more of us that are represented as quality educators on social media, like yourself and some other incredible people, the better, because then it drowns out the noise of the people that are not there for the right reasons. They're just there to kind of force an agenda, which is really sad.
Yeah. I mean, to go back on what you were talking about in terms of the realization that money that you earn on social media needs to be taxed. I can't tell you the amount of conversations I've had with people who think, I've got money in crypto. The tax man's never going to touch this. And I'm like, HMRC will have agreements with a lot of the providers now. So they report to them. And if you're not reporting, guess what? You're going to get a letter in the post potentially with a reminder saying, hey, you owe us some money. So it's really...
Do you find as well that people think that HMRC is like this like old granddad or old grandma that doesn't go on social media? Like they have eyes everywhere. And if they think that there's a place that they could be making money from us, like they're going to come to us and find out. Like they're not going to just let these huge loopholes just disappear into the abyss. Like, it is sad, I think, that there is this misconception. And I think also somewhere that can muddy the lines is this difference between like us and America. So, we have a certain amount of, responsibility to make clear we're talking about. So when I talk about even the UK or even specifically England, because obviously Scotland and Wales have some different like tax rules. So you have to make really clear this is about England and this isn't. And like, because when some people come to me and they're like, oh, I saw this guy talking about investing and he said I should do this, this and this. And then they show me this person and it's an American person and it's just it's different. The system's different and you have to be really cautious that you're finding out the information that suits you, your country, etc.
I think you're right with that 100%. The thing that I don't get though, and I don't know, I'd love to get your view on this. When I started out, I was intentional that I wanted to be UK focused and UK focused alone, because there are still, I know a number of pretty big YouTubers, TikTokers who are English, but they talk in dollars. And I'm like, why? I don't like, I get that there's more money to be made if you target yourself at the American audience, because obviously it's bigger. But you're from the UK, it's like, it makes sense for you to talk about the domestic market. Financially, you might take a little bit of a hit, but I don't know. It's very, very weird, because I think you're right. People in America, because the system works very, very differently, and because the content obviously reaches us here in the UK, it can spring all kinds of ideas. And you've got to remind and say, look, their Roth IRA or whatever 401k or whatever it is they talked about, you need to find the UK equivalent, which is essentially a pension. So all this wonderful stuff that they're talking about doesn't necessarily apply to you in that theoretical, practical way, but actually in the UK it's called a pension, and this is how it works. But it's very, very fascinating.
For me, I'd love to see, I'd love to see financial education taught all over the world, and people are doing it. They are doing, I was at a summit last week for young leaders, and I was speaking to a guy that's delivering financial education in Indonesia in a very similar way to how I'm doing it. And it was incredible. And I was like, my mind was just open. I was like, we are all doing this in our own areas. But the best thing to do is to stick to your area and tackle that first, because there's no point in me going into a classroom full of, let's imagine a sixth form group based in Birmingham and telling them about how to invest in the US or how the pension system works in the US. Like, it's just not helpful for them. We need to be giving them, like, let's not always jump ahead. And sometimes I think I can be guilty of jumping into the hard stuff and forgetting that, especially in school ages, they need to understand the basics first, because they want to ask me how investing works. And I ask them, have you got bank accounts yet? And sometimes you see their faces and they're like, oh, not yet. And I'm like, well, could we start there? Do you understand what a bank is? Or do you understand what currency is before you tell me that you've made your millions in cryptocurrency? That's like, I think that's the one thing I would say, is that there's so many things. Like, if anything last week taught me at this summit is there are problems all over the world going on. But if we could just do one little thing at a time and just focus on our areas, we'll just see this ripple effect. And I honestly believe, like, when I go into these classrooms, that I am speaking to the leaders of the next generation. If I can provide them with just even one bit of knowledge that helped them get to that next step, then I've done my job. You know, and even if it's the 6-year-old that I explained about, you know, budgeting and how to plan a party, and they then, you know, become the prime minister,
Yeah.
then you never know. It could, that kind of conversation can be being had by any age group, really, and especially
Yeah.
our next generation.
It's interesting because at the end of the day, that those basics that you talk about, I mean, it's the same thing with adults. Like first time investors, it's like you want to jump before you can even crawl straight into the pool of trading. And I'm like, whoa, 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 just stop. Basics first. I think that is one of those things. It's almost human nature, though. It's like psychologically, and I think social media also leads into this. The fact that, you know, you see so much on social media that this is where you want to be. So it's what's the quickest route to get there, and it's like slow down. Like the foundations first. You've got to build those, and then it allows you to get to there. I think the issue with social media is that people just want it to happen quicker, and you cannot cheat time at the end of the day. It's perseverance and patience.
We have that, don't we have that across everything? You know, like physical health. Like, we don't expect to go to the gym one day and the next day have like rippling six packs, if that's what you're after, or, you know, be able to lift the heaviest weight in the gym. But for some reason, when it comes to finance, people expect themselves, they expect way too much of themselves so quickly, and they think they should all be accountants and all be financial advisors like overnight, just based off the fact that they've watched 1 or 2 videos. And I also have to stress this, when I do my reels, sometimes I get a few people in my DMs that remind me that I've not explained the nuances of this particular subject. So like I did a reel on inheritance tax, and I did exams for years understanding estate planning and inheritance tax. And I tried to put that information into a 1-minute video. Yes, Darren, Karen, whoever we're talking to here on our DMs, I am going to miss some little bits out. I am going to miss out a nuance of this just tiny bit of tax law, because it is not important for everyone to understand absolutely everything, because I will lose everyone, because they won't want to listen to a 10-minute video on inheritance tax once they're flicking through their story or once they're flicking through reels on Instagram. But what they might do is just hear me for a minute, just a minute, that's all I need, and explain just some of the basics that they can then go away and build on that knowledge from. I think that is it's definitely one of the hardest things with social media, is having those DMs where it's like, you didn't tell me this little thing that changed this nuance, and I'm let's just give it a break.
That's the hidden part of social media that nobody realizes. And for me, I don't know. I'm kind of like, listen, social media and what I do certainly is not meant to give you all of the answers. It's supposed to be a research tool. So you watch one of the videos, you think, okay, I'm going to try and figure out what the next step might be. That's the function. It's not to give you the ins and outs, to give you all of the answers. It's a research tool. And I think so, because of the way social media is, because it's fast content, really, really quick, you can find the information. People expect to be able to find the answers there. But like you're saying, it's like inheritance tax is a big, big, complex topic. I mean, the instruments and the things that you could do, depending on your circumstances, are so vast and so varied. It's impossible to put that into a 60-second TikTok or even a 90-minute, 10-minute video a lot of the time. You can't do it. So boil it down to the essence it's hard to do. I struggle sometimes. I'm like, but I'm like, okay, objectively, does it give you enough if you know nothing? And that's not often the barometer that I go for, but it's so difficult a balance to strike.
I always use 2 rules. One is, if I can show the video to my mum and she understands it, I've done a good job. So if she understands it, I've done my job. And secondly, if I could show the video to my 6-year-old nephew, then, and he understands it, or can understand what is coming out of my mouth to a basic level, then I've done my job. That's pretty much with all of my videos. So you're not going to catch me dancing on a TikTok video to a song with swear words on, purely because I have this rule where if I wouldn't show it to my nephew or I wouldn't show it to my mum, I'm not going to put it on social. That's just me. I think there is a massive space open for that sort of fun entertainment, and I really love it. But for me, that's just my rule, because especially when I work with young people, I never ever want something. I don't even want them to come to my page and be like, oh God, this is not the kind of face she portrayed in front of us. Whereas I would like to think I'm pretty much identical on social media as I am to face in their classrooms delivering these workshops. And I I do believe it's an absolute privilege of mine to be able to go and have an hour minimum of their time to deliver this to them and shape their future. So I then need to give them, you know, the you know, give them what they're owed, in the sense of when they try and find more from me, that it's exactly the same content and not something completely rogue.
Consistency is key. 100% in
Of
anything
course it
that you
is.
do. Not being something that you're not just to try and fit in. And I think that's the hardest thing with social media a lot of the time. You know, how do you genuinely, authentically be yourself in delivering your message? One of the hardest things I've had to figure out. And starting out, I was very, very nervous that people might be like, oh, he has no idea what he's talking about, or might not like my mannerisms. But at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter as much as what you're trying to say. And as creators, you always have to get comfortable with that, ultimately, and be comfortable in your own skin and who you are and how you deliver messages and how you speak.
Yeah, there's enough of us as well that I think if you're looking for something, you should be able to find it. You know, you're looking for someone that is talking about that exact subject you want to learn about, or talking in a way that you like to learn. Not everyone is going to love my videos, and that is absolutely okay. But I know that the content I'm producing is what I wish I was taught, and that's where I'm just going to lead from. And you know, people will ask me produce more content. Great, I'll keep going. You know, I'll just stay for as long as I'm needed. I've got the like absolute privilege of being able to go on to TV and radio now, which for me was this like 5-year goal, and it's now become like a very real reality. And it just means for me, I can just spread the message even more. If people like me, great. Or, you know, when I was very lucky to be on this morning, and I think one of the only tweets, because I did what you just shouldn't do, which is like check Twitter once you come off. And I think one of the tweets was this man that said, he was like, where have they got this 80s dancer from? Because I had like big hair and like my purple jumpsuit on. And I was like, do you know what? It could be worse. He wasn't saying that my finance was wrong. Yeah. So, you know, not everyone's going to love you, but you just got to be you and know that some people will.
Yeah. I have to ask you, how have you found doing media? Because like for me, it was nerve-wracking to start off with, because I'm like you, I'm like, oh my God, Twitter's going to be a mess. Did I say something wrong? Like, oh my God, like, but as I got more into it, I was like, okay, just ignore it, and just, then you find your own comfort zone, don't you? And you kind of become comfortable with the situation. You understand how you work in that environment too. How have you found it?
So I found radio really fun. So I do a weekly slot on LBC, and I found that really engaging and funny. And the guy that I speak to every Sunday is really lovely. So that I find really fun. But TV, I do still find really nerve-wracking, because like you said, you know, are you going to say something wrong? You have to be quick. You also have to be comfortable with the chaos of it. You know, when you, just before you go on TV, you watch these incredible presenters, especially on This Morning. I think I had Rochelle and Andy as my presenters, and they are so professional. There's chaos behind the scenes, and they just stand there as if they are completely calm. Really relaxed. And you have to kind of do the same. You have to be like, yeah, I'm absolutely totally comfortable with sitting here and 7 cameras and 7 huge lights pointed at my face. This is my average Tuesday. Is this not yours? So I think it is, for me, it's been an absolute privilege. Like I always dreamed of presenting and delivering more financial education through media like TV and radio. And like I said before, it was a pipeline dream, and now it has become a reality through social media, which, again, answering your question before, how is social media helping? It's given me that platform that, you know, it hasn't happened overnight. Some people might think it hasn't happened overnight, but it has meant that some of my dreams can become realities much sooner.
I've got one more question I want to ask you, and I want to tag something on. So let's get to this one. I just want to know what your top 3 tips would be for people if they wanted to kind of like better their finances. They're struggling right now. What would be your top 3 tips?
Ooh, okay. So first one, and I think it's just because sometimes I'm referred to as the queen of tax codes, because I go on about tax codes far too often, rightly or wrongly. I would say, please read your payslip, and you will have some form of a payslip, whether you are self-employed or employed. If you're self-employed, it might not look like everyone else's, but you will need to understand some basics like your tax code, how much tax you're paying each month. So every month, if you could do just one thing, it would be just read it. If you don't understand elements of it, obviously, do some education, learn, but just read it, because I think sometimes people think if I put the blinkers on and I don't look at it, then nothing can be wrong. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And I think also when people feel confident enough to read their payslip, the mindset shift is bonkers, because if they feel confident enough to read that and understand it, they're then happy to take on other subjects like pensions and other things that they didn't quite get before. So it can feel so simple, but yeah, number one would be read your payslip. I remember at school you used to be told like read the question. For me, it's read your payslip, don't overcomplicate it. And then two, and then leading on to three. So two is please do your own learning. If anything, we've talked about today is find someone online, find people online that you like and you respect and you think you can learn from, and follow them. Just take a little bit from them each week. It doesn't have to be intense. It doesn't have to be too much, but do your own learning. Don't just assume that because you understood tax at school, if you were taught, you now understand everything, because it's constantly changing. You constantly need to update your knowledge. And then third and finally is, once you've done that learning, is educate others. So if you can teach it to someone else, I know we've probably hit this drum many a times on here and over different mediums, but if you can teach someone else, you probably know it very well, and therefore can feel comfortable and educate others. And I don't joke when I say even your toddlers, don't try and explain cryptocurrency to your 2-year-old, but could you explain how coins work, or how notes like work for like buying things? And maybe to your 7-year-old, how does inflation work? That's a big word. They might even be just learning how to spell it. But don't think that just because they're young, or even because your parents are older, that you can't educate them. Educate others with your new information. So yeah, payslip, do your own education, and then educate others would be my top 3.
I love those. I absolutely love those. Payslip, man, I never used to look at my payslip. I remember years ago when I was in Canary Wharf, look at my payslip. It was always painful. Look at the tax section. I'm like, oh. And oftentimes I think a lot of people look at that thinking, this is how much tax I'm paying. Oh my God. But I think for me, it was kind of like, okay, maybe I need to be a little bit smarter, because I understand how much I've had to work. If I've paid that much to the tax man, I need to make sure I'm making some really good decisions myself, and maybe at least paying myself first from my paycheck to ensure that I don't go and spunkle all this up the wall because I feel generous this month because I've done okay.
Yeah, exactly. And also when you look at your pay slip, you can understand if things have gone wrong, because a lot of people don't realize, and it can go years on the wrong tax code, paying student loan into the wrong plan. Like, there are so many ways that things can go wrong on your payslip. And actually, people don't realize that you're accountable. It's not your payroll department. Obviously, there is a certain element that they should get things right, but it's on you. If you're on the wrong tax code for years, it can be really difficult to correct that. And if you look at your payslip, I know, like I said the same thing when I got my very first job. Hilariously, it was in accountancy, and I turned around to my boss and I was like, did I miss the lesson where we were like explained what any of this meant? And he was wonderful to me, and he said at the time, he was like, well, what is it you don't understand? And I was like, well, what does TC mean? And it was tax code. And I was like, okay, what do the numbers mean? And he's like, oh, this. And then I was like, what does NI mean? And I was an accountant, so in my head, it blew my mind that like we were learning about P&Ls all day long, cash flows, balance sheets, like running businesses. But for some reason, we were just missing out this like fundamental key piece of information, which was that tiny piece of like paper. Yeah. Well, it's not even paper anymore, is it? We all get it electronically. Digital, but that had so much information that can change your life, and we were just all avoiding it because it felt uncomfortable.
I agree with you 100%. But then again, in the example in the story that you just shared right there, it's the fact that a lot of the time, even when you work in an industry, doesn't mean that you fully understand and implement some of those things. The amount of divorce lawyers I've sat with who are like, you should have a prenup, and they wax lyrical. I'm like, do you have a prenup? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, but why? It's common. It's commonplace. It really, really is.
That's so true. And like with all of us, we are trying so hard. Like I'm trying so hard with my business to, make it a success. And sometimes that means I'm not necessarily, it's kind of a, you have to make decisions for your business that you wouldn't necessarily tell someone that was employed to do, or someone that was running their own business, because things change. And that's why I say when you're doing your education never stops. You have to keeping one ear to the ground on what's changing and how it affects you. Because, we can talk about ISAs, which to some people you think, well, they haven't changed in years. Why would I need to worry? And then the next thing you know, things might be changing. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge about your recent reel on changes to ISAs. So what is, there is nothing that's off limits. Everything is changeable all the time. So definitely keeping one ear on the ground is a really good idea.
Right, I do have one question for you before I ask you to share your socials and stuff and how people can find you. Would you write a book, and are you thinking of a book?
Yes, I would. And I am thinking of a book. I am.
Good.
Yes, I am, basically.
The works, or something that's a work in progress that you've not yet firmly approached?
It's currently a work in
Good.
progress.
Okay, good.
It's not going to be far off what I do now.
Good.
It won't come as a shock to anyone. It will be helping. Effectively, it's always about helping the next generation understand their finances and everybody else, really.
Good.
But yeah, for me, I would love to. It'd be an absolute dream to see something like that published.
Good. I'm sure it will.
Who knows? You never know.
I'm sure it will, because I think you're at the phase now where it's almost like a natural extension. I mean, with my book, it's so weird having a book out, because for me, my book was all about legacy. If I die today, I've left something behind that people will always be able to see my name on, and the good that it basically does in sharing stories and sharing knowledge. And when you get messages, it's funny. I was in London yesterday, driving back at the supercharger. I've got some food in my hand, and a guy comes back. I'm literally just listening to your audiobook right now. And it was so bizarre, but it touches people. And yeah, when it comes out, I would love to. I'll definitely grab a copy and love to get you on to talk about the book and the premise of it as well. So that would be amazing.
Yeah. That must happen to you all the time, Peter. I've only ever had that happen to me once, and it really freaked me out when someone came up to me and was like, "I follow you," and I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay, thank you." She's like, "You're really good," and I was like, "Thanks." Yeah. And then you just walk off and you're like, what bizarre interaction.
Yeah. It is such for me, it gives validation to what we do, because you'll know this, like, it's so hard. It can be a lonely place creating content, and it's a business, and you've got to learn about the business, and then brands wanting to work with you and things not going as you plan and people taking advantage, and you're constantly being the one who gives, that it's just sometimes when it's really, really difficult to have someone to be like, I really got benefit from your video, or I really enjoyed your book. It reminds me why I started this entire thing, to have conversations that I wish someone had with me when I was 19, 20. And so those interactions, they're bizarre to begin with, but they give me a boost. They give me like, okay, cool, you're doing good, even despite the fact that it's probably chaotic and really, really stressful half the time.
Yeah, I second all of that.
So where do people find you, Abby? How do people find you on socials? How do people connect with you?
So pretty much all of my socials are at @elent_finance. So ELENT_finance, FINANCE. That's my Instagram, which is where I produce most of my content. So reels and stories, and there my Finance Fridays and Sunday quiz are held there. And then we're also on TikTok, and we are going to be doing more on YouTube going forward. Just some like light touch stuff, just because I think it's an incredible place. Like you said, like there is a whole next generation that use just YouTube for education, which is very cool. So we want to be there as well. So yeah, Ellen_finance is where you can find us.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me on this one. And guys, what I'm going to do is all of the links will be in the show notes on Google, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of the good ones if you're listening to this. If you're on YouTube, you're watching this, they will be in the description of the episode. I would genuinely ask you, go follow. It's a really, really good content, and I'm always taking notes to try and kind of improve what I'm doing on Instagram as well. But enjoy your week, whatever it is that you're doing this week. Remember, money is a tool, life is for living. It's all about decisions that we make, and it's all about trying to upskill, make sure that we're in the best position to make the best decision. So I'll catch you next Friday. Enjoy yourselves. Cheers.